Hello and welcome to EN101. I wanted to kick off the class with this brief introduction to the course. If you've not been in school for a while, or even if you've just graduated from high school and you're not sure what college English courses are all about, this course was designed with you in mind. Whether you've had good or bad experiences in prior English classes, I hope you will approach this course with an open mind. This course is designed both to build on what you've learned previously and to challenge some of the things you may have been taught about writing. As our textbook points out, sometimes it's a good idea to unlearn old ideas to make way for new learning. Let's start by looking at the course objectives. Okay, when you, when you are done with this course, you should have some experience in each of the following bullet points. Incorporate writing components appropriate to a collegiate essay. Evaluate how the writing process is used in one's own writing. Analyze the role of reading and writing in one's academic and professional career. Apply strategies to achieve clarity and effective style in writing. Differentiate between different writing patterns, rhetorical modes, and demonstrate guidelines and strategies for writing an effective research paper. Now let's look at the way the course is set up. There are 3 modules in the course, and each module corresponds to one of the 3 types of essays you will be writing for this course. It's important to know that there are many different types of essays. Some examples include comparison contrast essays, profiles, evaluations such as film or restaurant reviews, and lab reports. But for our purposes, we will focus on 3 types of essays: personal writing, informative writing, and persuasive writing. These are the 3 basic types of essays that you can find throughout academic writing. Almost every other kind of essay builds off of one or more of these basic types or modes. What follows is a brief description of each. First, though, some of you may wonder why we spend so much time writing essays in college, and what exactly is an essay? Your textbook defines essay and how it relates to academic papers in pages 3 to 5. Excuse me. But briefly, an essay is a type of writing which explores an idea or makes a point about an idea. It should discuss the idea thoroughly in such a way that the reader can see how the writer came to his or her conclusions about the idea. Essays are found all around us in one form or another, such as opinion or op-ed pieces in newspapers, blogs, and articles of every kind. Essays help writers develop critical thinking skills and creativity. Now let's look at the 2 types of personal writing you'll be doing for this course: a literacy narrative and a personal narrative. A literacy narrative, which is part of the week 1 assignment, focuses on an event from your life that shapes your understanding of reading or writing. It can be a positive experience or a negative experience, or some combination of the 2. In a literacy narrative, the writer tells a story about how the event impacted his or her life. And to do so, the writer uses the tools of storytelling, such as description, details, and dialogue. Literacy narratives can be powerful. A good example is the work of Frederick Douglass, a former slave who went on to become a social reformer and abolitionist. Douglass spends much of his autobiography describing how his slave master's wife taught him to read at a young age. Douglass and many others recognized that literacy was the key to freedom. It can be the key to your success as well. In week 3 of the course, you will shift focus slightly and write a personal narrative. This type of writing is similar to a literacy narrative, but it can be about any event in your life. Students have written about a wide range of personal experiences, such as joining the military, getting married, or becoming a parent. But the subject of your personal narrative doesn't have to be a major event, though it can be. Any event in your life, no matter how small, can have a lasting and profound impact. Sometimes we don't recognize that impact until we look back on it years later. For example, in her autobiography, Annie Dillard, a well-known author, describes an incident that happened when she was 7 years old. She and some friends were out throwing snowballs when she decided to throw one at a passing car. The irate driver jumped out of the car and chased her through the neighborhood. Annie got away, but looking back on the experience years later, she realized that she never felt more alive than in that moment when she thought she was running for her life. You'd think that she'd learned not to throw snowballs at passing cars, and maybe she did, but that's not why the event was significant to her. It was significant because it taught her something about being human. Likewise, the best narratives tell us something about ourselves, something unexpected. Where might you use personal writing? One way to do that is to build rapport with your readers. If the reader sees that you are a human being and you've had experiences, you've made mistakes and you've learned from them, then the reader feels more connected to you as a writer and maybe more comfortable with their own experiences as well. You use personal writing to understand your story and how events have shaped you. Sometimes we don't really understand the impact of an event until we actually write it down and recount it for someone else to read. To connect your experiences with those of readers. As I just mentioned, that helps build rapport with a reader. And it helps you as a writer feel like you are connected to the people you're writing for. And to understand and express what it means to be human. Being human is a large part of what writing is all about. We write to understand ourselves and to understand this collective experience we have as human beings on planet Earth. And sometimes the experiences that we have don't lead to the conclusions that we think we're going to lead. Life is all about learning more about ourselves, learning more about our experiences, learning more about the world we live in. When we get to week 5, we will be shifting gears even more. In that week, you will write an informative essay. There are many types of informative essays, but for our purposes, we will be focusing on a how-to essay. Just as it sounds, a how-to essay teaches the reader how to do something. This type of writing is quite common. It can be found in instruction manuals, for example. Excuse me. But there's more to informative writing than simply giving instructions. You have to engage the reader, use various teaching strategies, and in some cases persuade them to do the things in your way or in a better way. Students have written about many different topics, such as how to make a family recipe, how to build a shooting shack for hunters, and even how to care for a person who has dementia. The trick to this type of assignment is to pick something you are very knowledgeable about, something you can teach the reader to do without having to look up a lot of information. It may be tempting to use generic topics such as how to change the oil in your car, but I encourage you to go a bit deeper than that. Look for something unique or interesting, something only you can teach the reader to do. Another approach is to find a unique and interesting way to teach the reader how to do something. For an example of this, read the student essay, Your First Kill, on page 232 of your textbook. Where might you use informative writing? One way to use that is if you are in a position where you can teach employees or colleagues a skill or procedure. To teach readers something of value that they know little or nothing about. To show readers there's a better way of doing something. And to eliminate the guesswork and uncertainty about a phenomenon that people take for granted, such as falling in love. There's a wonderful essay in your textbook called Why Falling in Love Feels So Good that you will be reading later in the course. Finally, the last essay you will write for this course is a persuasive essay, also known as an argument. The word argument is used in many different ways, but I don't want you to think of argument as winning a fight or being loud and obnoxious. Argument, as used in academics and professions, is a civilized way of thinking through an issue, presenting a case, and respecting differences. An academic argument has several features such as a thesis statement and counterarguments, which we will cover in detail later in the class. Excuse me. Where might you use persuasive writing? One very common way is to convince decision makers on the best course of action. And decision makers can be people in your company, managers, executives, others who are empowered to make decisions that affect the company. And those decisions can be something like anything from, buying a new copier to changing your strategic focus as a company. Who are your targeted customers? What are you trying to get your targeted customers to do? All of these things are people that people make decisions about. And argument can be used to persuade them to take one course of action or another. Another way for the persuasive writing is used is to convince readers to look at something in a new way. So especially something that's kind of common and commonplace. I mean, we may take for granted. There's a wonderful essay in your book called Lucy, You Have Some Splaining to Do, which is about the old sitcom I Love Lucy and how it communicates certain messages that we may not think it does. You will have a chance to read that when we get to week 6 of the class. And if you want to read it before then, that's always okay too. Persuasive writing is used to persuade others to accept a point of view that may seem controversial or is not well understood. And we see some examples of that in our day-to-day basis that have to do with politics and other very well-known issues. I want you to think beyond that, though, because very often when we're talking about politics and about certain issues, people aren't really trying to persuade people. They're just trying to express their point of view. And that's not really the same thing as being persuasive. But you can use persuasive writing to convince others to look at something in a different way. And finally, persuasive writing is often used to argue in favor of a specific solution or a call to action. A call to action is where you are actually telling the readers to go out and do something, go out and vote, go out and support this particular initiative. So persuasive writing is used a lot for that type of reason. Okay, the last thing I want to touch on in this presentation is some of the common features of essays and how they differ. I'm pointing this out because it's important to know that there are different types of essays and that they are intended to accomplish different things. Where students sometimes get confused in writing the wrong type of essay for an assignment, or in using features that aren't appropriate for certain types of essays. For example, first-person language such as I, me, and we is appropriate for personal writing, but it should be avoided in informative and persuasive writing. Even if you are writing to the same audience for all 3 types of essays, it's important to know that your audience will expect different things from each type of writing. An informative essay is not the place to share a personal story, for example. So the key aspect I want you to take away from this presentation is to know your audience and purpose. It is often said that there are 3 types of purposes in writing: to inform, to persuade, or to entertain. Sometimes these purposes overlap, and writers may have more than one purpose in mind, but it helps if one purpose dominates. The 3 essays you'll be writing are meant to give you practice with each of these purposes. As you become more experienced with writing, you can and should experiment. That's all. I look forward to seeing you in class.